And when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman that brought forth the man-child. Revelation 12:13. Greetings, friends. I want to bring something to your attention this morning. As Seventh-day Adventists, we should not be harum-scarum about these end-time prophecies. When we said that the dragon was wrath with the woman, well, he persecuted the woman, first of all, that brought forth the man-child. What is the Bible saying to us? The Bible is giving us a time factor. Remember, this woman represents God's church. There are two women in the Bible, of course. One is chaste woman, and one a vile woman. This chaste woman of Revelation chapter 12, as Seventh-day Adventists we are familiar with. God is giving us a timeline of this church. His church, of course, is coming from the beginning of time, from the false worship and true worship set up by Cain and Abel. Of course, we are familiar with that. But when the Bible said that the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth a man-child, it is bringing us right up to the Jewish dispensation, the Jewish church, that dispensation of God's church. So the church has been traveling. That's why the Bible refers to it as having two wings of an eagle. So if the Bible is giving us a time factor of his church, when Christ was born to the Jewish church, we know. So it pinpoints the time of this church. All right, let's move forward a little in Revelation chapter 12 and highlight some of the main points that as Seventh-day Adventists we should not be missing at this time. We have missed them for too long. No longer should we miss these points. So having brought us up to this point, we know that this is when Christ was to be born from the Jewish church. So that's the timeline we are going, that's the beginning. We are going to start from there and move through Revelation chapter 12 and highlight some very vital lessons in this session. So we move to 14, let's read 14. I said, and to the woman were given two wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time, times and a half of time from the face of the serpent. Now what is this? Well, practically speaking, the Jewish church was based in Jerusalem. When the Bible talks about wilderness, it is implying that there was a vineyard, or there is a vineyard. When the church is deemed to be in the wilderness, it is telling us that it is no longer in the land, in the promised land, where God raised up the church. Remember, Christ raised up the church in Jerusalem. So the church flying to the wilderness is showing us that the church moved from her location and is in the Gentiles' world, so to speak. I know we are flush with the Puritans, or the people moving from Europe and coming to America and all that. We have that sort of information there, but I'll talk about that in another session. But just hold on to that for a moment. Just sort of follow what we are looking at here. So the church, of course, was in the Gentiles' world, away from the vineyard. She was given two wings, and it is showing that moving out of the moving from the vineyard to the wilderness, it's showing us the period of time during which the church was persecuted. And it is really talking about the 1260 years of the dark ages of religion. So the church has been in the wilderness, but she had to be specially nourished for that 1260 years. Right? So let's see the point. She was persecuted in the promised land. She went into the wilderness. That means she left the vineyard, went into the wilderness. She was persecuted. She was nourished, in other words, nourished for that span of time, the time and dividing of time. But the church has been in the wilderness after the birth of Christ, after his ministry, when, of course, we know that the Jews rejected the church they experienced. Christ raised up the Jewish church that birthed Christ, rejected Christ. So Christ, through his ministry, after his baptism, he raised up his church, the apostolic church. That church experienced a falling away. Of course, we know that the apostles, the leaders, were martyred. So the church was persecuted. Now she left that domain and she flew into the wilderness. It's showing us that at this time she is being nourished during the 1260 years. Now let's go to 15. 15 says, "And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood." Now, what is this talking about? Well, we know that if we jump to Revelation 17:15, this water is representing people. So we know that over a period of time when the devil was persecuting, the more the devil persecuted the church, the more the gospel spread. Persecution spread the gospel. So that wasn't successful, so the devil changed his strategy and started to befriend the church. We know that happened since the time of Constantine, when the church was paganized. So since then the church has been, the flood has been coming into the church because the leaders have dropped the standard, lowered the standard, so to speak, and so the standard of the church lowered, so people will come in. That's what the flooding of the church is talking about. But this is critical. When you go to 16, it says, "And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth." Right? The earth helped the woman by swallowing up the flood. What is that saying to us? Have you ever heard of the purification of the church? Well, this is what is happening. The church as it stands now is overrun with pagans and overrun with the world, so to speak. Worldly standard is in it. God's church is not clearly identified. There is no clear line of demarcation to show that this is God's church. So what he has promised, that Ezekiel 9, we are to sigh and cry for the abomination in the church, yes, because God is about to purify. There will be a separation, with the tares will be removed from among God's people. God will have a pure church. Now listen what happened. As we move on in the scripture, we we will see that in let's go to verse 17. What verse 17 says? And the dragon was wroth with the woman, went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandment of God, and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Now, we explain this verse among ourselves and said, the dragon is wroth with the Seventh-day Adventist Church and is warring with the Seventh-day Adventist. It's not like that. What happened is that when the church is purified, and yes, Seventh-day Adventists, because we are at that point where the church has moved to this point where God's truth is, where God's doctrine is, pure doctrine is. That's the church. Laodicean Seventh-day Adventist, that's where it is right now. So, he is about to purify his church. But when we explain this verse 17, it is telling us that it's after the purification, and the dragon was wroth with the woman. The only time that the dragon can only be wroth with the woman, when he can't touch her. He cannot do anything to the church when the church is purified. So, the dragon will be wroth with the woman. Who is the woman? It will be the purified church. Then he will go to make war with the remnant of her seed. Who is the remnant of her seed? It's a great multitude, the last set. A remnant is the last portion of a larger portion. The remnant of her seed are those who will be called out of Babylon. Yes. So, hopefully we have a better insight into the church and the dragon. We have a timeline. We can follow what the Bible is saying. The dragon is wroth with the woman after the church is purified, after the tears would have been removed, after the dragon's flood would be removed from the church. That's when he will not be able to touch the woman. So all he could do is be angry with her. But he can't do anything more to her, so he will go, and that's why he will spill that's when he will spill his venom against the woman.